Hello, everyone. Welcome to our holding space, an ongoing conversation about life, the universe, and everything in between that my dear friend and colleague, Reverend David Miller, and I engage in. And today we are honored to welcome our colleague, mentor, and friend, the Reverend Bill Sinkford, who has graciously agreed to join us for this episode. I am the Reverend Abhi Janamanchi. My pronouns are he and him, and I serve Cedar Lane Unitarian Universalist congregation in Bethesda, Maryland.
I am Reverend David Miller. I'm the Senior Minister of the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Fairfax in Oakton, Virginia. You said who graciously agreed. I think that we would say foolishly agreed, but we'll wait and see how that goes. And Reverend Sinkford, would you introduce yourself, please?
I would. I'm Reverend Bill Sinkford. I am currently trying retirement for a second time after serving both the large church here in Portland and then most recently All Souls Church in Washington, D.C. And I'm delighted to be here with my two good colleagues and friends.
Thank you, Bill. Yeah, you're going to be retiring until you do something else like come help Abhi during his sabbatical.
Well, you know,
Very
retirement doesn't need to look like a rocking chair, David.
I don't know. A rocking chair looks pretty good to me right now.
Oh, there you go. There's that.
Hey, we thought we'd talk today a little bit about you know, where we are. Does this election change anything as Unitarian Universalists? If so, what? And kind of get your thoughts about that because you are not just wiser than us, but smarter. So that's what we thought we'd ask you.
I'm going to let that pass, David. I'll just let that pass. Um, I think there are a couple of things that I would offer up to get us started, and then I hope this can be a conversation rather than a monologue. The first is that I was not surprised by the outcome of the election. I was disappointed, but I was not surprised because I have known at some level in my spirit and my person that the attractiveness of the Trump message was very broad, and that at least half of our neighbors, broadly speaking, found that it resonated for them or that they were willing to live with it. So the fact that that's true was not a surprise for me, and so I was not surprised by the outcome of the election. Um, but I was disappointed. I was disappointed because I'm a hopeful person. The results of the election will clearly are already changing and will change many more things for us as Unitarian Universalists, as religious people, and as a culture. Our trans siblings are already feeling more and more targeted. They were already feeling targeted. Our immigrant neighbors, particularly those without legal documents, are going to be under, at least if the language is anything like accurate, under tremendous threat. And all those who look like they might be Black and brown people without documents are going to feel the impact of the deportations. So there are many communities within our community that are going to be under attack. I think that's the only way to think about it. And that's going to call Unitarian Universalists and progressive religious folks and religious folks in general to a different way of being in the world. I just think that that's without doubt. And at some level, it doesn't change things because we have always been in an environment where the value of beloved community is a tentatively held and fragile um, um, faith for most Americans. I don't know, were either of you surprised by the outcome of the election?
I was not. Uh, I was expecting this, both in terms of what I saw the election landscape pointing to, as well as what I felt this country carries in terms of its ability to elect a woman and a person of color. And so part of it was confirmation, which really did not leave me feeling any satisfaction. It only made me feel more depressed, and because I would have loved to have been proven wrong. That would have actually delighted me if that had been the case. And recognizing also the way in which this election season went, it was pointing to what seemed like an outcome that was people reacting in ways. So in that way, I was preparing myself for this outcome. It still hurt, and it was saddening. I was angry. All of that.
I am tentative about my prognostication of what could have been different. I have a political science degree, and I've been a political junkie my entire life. And so to sort of go back and say, well, if this would have happened, if that would have happened, they didn't. And I wish maybe some of that had. But I had higher hopes in two things. Foolishly, I understand at times. One is that the issue around Roe versus Wade would have brought out a higher turnout. That was certainly my hope. And I had hope about that, honestly. And the other thing is that, the often said thing, if someone shows you who they are, believe them. And so there's been no hiding that. And the issues that are supported by those who won the election. So does that disappoint me about what I believe to still be issues that America has always dealt with? Yes. Misogyny, sexism, racism, issues of white supremacy and supremacy thinking. Those are all things that I grieve and continue to grieve for our country. And yet I had hoped, as I say, perhaps foolishly, that would at least influence enough folks that the turnout would have been different.
Well, I think that, the election was close.
Yes.
Right? So it's a question of 1 or 2 percentage points in a couple of states, and the outcome would have been different. But the fact remains that, call it half of our fellow Americans, were willing to buy into an alternative vision and hope. That is a real challenge for me. It's a real challenge for me because I'm a believer in beloved community. I'm a believer that a multicultural, multiracial, pluralistic, beloved community is not only possible, but that it would be powerful and nurturing and enlivening for all of us. But it's one of my takeaways from the election is that that vision is clearly not held by the majority of our fellow citizens and
Well, the
non-citizens
majority of our fellow citizens who voted,
who voted,
right? Who voted, right?
That the vision of America that motivated, I'm going to expose my own prejudices, I suppose. The vision of America that motivated most or many of our fellow citizens was one of comfort and privilege. That was the deal. That America was supposed to deliver up comfort and privilege for them, rather than the power and possibility of a multicultural, pluralistic, beloved community. And so there we are. And the question now is how to move forward, and what we as progressive religious folks, Unitarian Universalists, are called to do, how we're called to be, how we're called to show up. Carrying that sense of grief that you both talked about, and disappointment, and questioning about whether our good news is really good enough good news to win the day.
Yeah.
I saw you speak at the Mosaic conference we recently held here at Cedar Lane, and I quoted you the following week, because I've quoted you, I don't know, about a million times, but I quoted you the following week, and I said, you talked about we cannot do this work without joy and celebration. And the very first thing I said from my pulpit this week was, I got up at the introduction and I said, I will not be robbed of joy.
Amen.
And my congregation burst into applause. It wasn't meant to be an applause line. I do write applause lines occasionally, but it was not meant to be an applause line, because you are so right. There are disappointments and there are paths to beloved community that we are far from. And yet half the country and our congregations are filled with people whose values and whose desires cannot be, we must feel that celebration and joy, or else I think we're doomed. And so I am grateful for you saying that I could steal it. And I am grateful that my congregation and other congregations that I'm aware of this Sunday felt very much that way. Abhi, how did it go with your congregation?
Well, we had a similar response on Sunday. I was trying to lift up two things that I felt we needed to be present to and focused on. One is being a sanctuary, and being a sanctuary people, and being in solidarity. A sanctuary people for each other and our community, and for those who need sanctuary, and being in solidarity with one another, supporting one another, being present with one another, and in solidarity with communities that are going to be impacted. And I just felt we needed to pause and be present, not even take stock of the situation, but to really be present and breathe and hold what we are holding. That was what was called for in the moment. Not to channel that energy into something action oriented. Start the revolution tomorrow. There will be time for that, but for now, we need to be aware and attentive, and go into that place, that deeper place within, where we need to rebuild capacity, and in that also the hope for the struggle ahead. And Bill, your reminder to us at the Mosaic Conference about holding joy in and through all the grief and the anger and the disappointment and the sorrow and the struggle in doing the work of the beloved community, I feel really applies even more now. I just felt you were kind of being prophetic in offering that to us at the conference, and I just feel it is becoming more real in this moment.
I'm glad that my words resonated. They're words that I believe very deeply in my spirit. What I know in my person, in my body, is that our efforts toward beloved community, these fragile, imperfect efforts toward beloved community, are most real and most nurturing when we can rest into them and enjoy them. And that there is something in that lived experience. It's imperfect and flawed, it's all of those things. But if we can be present to what it is that we have found that stirs and nurtures our spirits, that's firm ground on which we can then mobilize and show up as allies and companions and advocates.
Mm-hmm.
Because all of that's going to be necessary. But it's so easy to imagine that work as kind of grim, right? And there needs to be that sense of joy and satisfaction to ground it, I think.
Abhi, I added 2 S's to the sanctuary and solidarity that we had discussed before we did this Sunday. My 2 S's were safety and sacrifice. Because I wondered what level of risk was worth what level of sacrifice. And something that I wanted to sort of put out there for us to consider as we thought about solidarity and sanctuary.
Right.
And I was so grateful that, well, Bill, I mean, the way you just said that we have to live in this, right, before we can do these other things that we're going to be called to do, and how it's meaningful for us to build on that joy. I remember doing something with Abhi, actually. I don't know if you were there, Bill, but the Poor People's Campaign launch that Reverend Barber did in Washington, D.C. And I can't remember the name of the minister who's the singer, Abhi.
Yara Allen.
Yes. Yara Allen, yes.
Gynecologist.
Yes. And the point that she made, like, we can't do this without singing, right? And it's like, oh, of course we can't do this without singing. Of course we can't do this without some sense of joy in that solidarity, because lack of hope and despair will only feed the side that does not want us to have beloved community.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Bill, as you were talking about the vision of the beloved community and solidarity, the way you were framing it seems to me that it's the call to embrace a deeper solidarity. Something that extends beyond the labels, beyond our differences, into the very heart of what it means to be human, and what it means to center love, that radical love, into everything that we are and everything that we do. And to me, that's a real call for us to pay attention to, as to what it really means to embody that radical commitment to each other's well-being, and really feel and understand what it means to say that none of us are free until all of us are free. I mean, some of these things are starting to take new meaning for me. As somebody who loves words and crafts them, to suddenly hear them differently in the context of the moment that we are finding ourselves in. That's actually giving me joy.
I think one of the lessons of, I think, every successful movement for justice with which I'm familiar is that the people most engaged in the transformation found the process of that transformation to be nurturing and joyful and hard work, but as Kamala said, we love hard work, but gratifying and enlivening and worth it. And what I believe is that all of us, Unitarian Universalists particularly, and progressive religious folks, have gotten, I think, pretty comfortable understanding that there are some differences that we're not going to make the reason for punishment. We've gotten pretty comfortable, queer folks and trans folks, we're pretty clear on that. But there are places that we have not gone in terms of our willingness to say, okay, the folks in Appalachia whose livelihoods, have been taken away from them, we can, we're inclined to talk about this in terms of the role of the corporation and yada, yada, yada. These are real lives that people are really struggling, right? We need to develop the capacity to see human suffering beyond the particularities of the oppressions that we have dealt with, and to see the possibility in all of us. Now, this is really there's centuries of human living that we're going against here, folks. I'm just to be clear. But I think that's the challenge. You said it very well, Abhi.
Is this not about a true understanding of universalism?
Amen.
I mean, right? Isn't that what it's about? Isn't that what you're saying? Universalism is not only those who are willing to come on Sunday. It's the true sense that, it's part of my sadness about all this is people who vote against their own interests, because those are people who unfortunately have heard one side of a story in a bubble that doesn't always speak to the humanity of their existence. And a true sense of universalism does. And we're not great at that. I'm not saying that we're the answer to that, right? I'm just saying that that's something for us. Your words, both of you, are inspiring to me, but it's also a challenge I may have never experienced.
That's a wonderful way to look at universalism. As you were talking, David, the thing that came to me was universalism is both and the time we are in really calls for us to cultivate ourselves from not engaging in reductive thinking, or give in to the sense of this is not we should be focusing on, this is actually what we should focus on. Because there's a lot of analysis going on right now about what should Kamala Harris and the campaign should have done, focusing on, and that there is so much wokeness in that culture, and focusing on those kinds of issues really meant we missed the boat on all the other issues. Again, this either or way of looking at things. And, which actually, as an aspect of how fascism works, Timothy Snyder talks about it in his book. And part of what he warns people is, complying in advance. Which we also saw happening, with the major newspapers coming out without endorsing a candidate, complying in advance. And I feel part of our commitment needs to be that we will not comply in advance. That we will continue to hold strong to our values and what they call us to be, not surrender our values or abandon our friends or the communities that we have worked hard to create and hold together to be a living sanctuary. We're going to continue doing that. And we're going to expand our understanding and our consciousness to recognize aspects of people's lives that we don't see, be it because of our own place and privilege and orientation in life, that sometimes does not give us the ability to see the realities that people actually live in. And sometimes our commitments blinding us to those realities, that we are really being called to stretch and understand that. And how do we hold both?
Holding both is it's powerful and challenging. Abhi. One of the threads that I did want to hold up was that I think there are dangers for us in this period.
Mm-hmm.
Dangers of embracing the kind of scapegoating that's taking place of trans folks is the first group that comes to mind, and of the culture of wokeness, which is really a culture of awakening, to buy in, to believe that was the problem, that's what cost the election, which it was certainly, anti-wokeness was certainly used by the Republicans, but it was not what cost the election. And so part of what we're called to do, I think, is to continue the journey on which we've been moving, which is not to say that some of the symptoms of, or the particular strategies now are strategies that are going to be a part of beloved community, or going to get us there. So, will introducing oneself with one's pronouns get us to the beloved community? I don't know. In UUA circles, it's now deemed appropriate to deal with those who are vision impaired by describing, what you're wearing, and your skin color, and whether you wear glasses will that be a part of the beloved? Will that get us to the beloved? Yeah, I don't know. It's the approach that we're currently taking, and so we need to understand that these are attempts, these are experiments, these are responses, and the desire to get it perfect right now, every time. We criticize that as a part of the culture of white supremacy. but it's really a spiritual uh, pit, actually. We're trying. And hopefully we find some joy in the trials and the mistakes. We're traveling territory that has not been confidently traveled before.
Well, and Adrien Marie Brown, always never a failure, always a lesson.
Yeah.
Not everything is going to work. And what strikes me from part of this conversation that we've just been talking about is they've used stereotypes to try to get their political advantage. How do we humanize? Part of building beloved community is humanizing people, humanizing us all, right? So how do we do that in a way? I love, Bill, that you're talking about, do the things that we do help build beloved community? So it's an analysis that we have to always be making. We're setting off. One of the things about Adrien Marie Brown, actually, that I love is that it's not about the destination. It's about setting off in a direction and then correcting yourself if you've learned a lesson from it. So this is where we are maybe now in our progressive faith tradition. What are our lessons and where do we go next? Which is the subject, because of our time, of another one of our vlogs. We're trying to keep these a little shorter, but I think we're going to have Bill back, Abhi. What do you think?
I agree. We just started something, and I think it feels we need to continue this.
We do. Bill, thank you so much for agreeing to be with us today.
It's my pleasure and privilege. I think that there need to be more conversations at this level. That's one of the things that I think we are called to try to do, to keep pushing on some of these questions. What a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.